Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mishtapad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, we're going to be studying page 195 in the book. Yes. Good. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the 6th day of May, 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text number 10, page 195. I'll wait. I'll wait for you. 195. We need all the chanters we can get. Vitaraga Maya Krodha Manmaya Mamupashvitaha Bhahavot Jnana Tapasa Puta Madbhavamagata Vitaraga Maya Krodha Manmaya Mamupashvitaha Bhavo Jnana Tapasa Puta Madbhavamagata Vitaraga Bhayakrodha Manmaya Mamupashvita Bhavo Jnana Tapasa Puta Madbhavamagata Vitaraga Bhayakrodha Manmaya mam upashitaha bahavo jnana tapasa Bhutaman bhavamagata Vitaraga bhaya krodha Manmaya mam upashita Bahavo jnana tapasa Bhutaman bhavamagata. Parashakti, I'm sorry, we forgot you there in the corner. It's okay? Vitaragabhaya krodha Manmaya mam upashita Bahavo jnana tapasa Bhutamad bhavamagata. All right, I'll read the synonyms. Vita, freed from, raga, attachment, bhaya, fear, krodha, and anger. Mat mayaha, fully in me, mam, in me, upashitaha, being fully situated. Bhava, many, jnana, of knowledge, tapasa, by the penance. Puta, being purified. Mat bhavam, transcendental love for me. Agataha, attained. Translation. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence, attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of material consciousness: attachment to material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of the devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.4.15-16, the Science of Devotional Service, Adhar Shuddha Tataksaru Sango Tabhajana Kriya Tato Narta Nivritti Syat Tato Nishta Ruchistata Atas Saktis Tato Bhavas Tatak Premabhyudanchati Sadhakanamayam Premna Praru Bhave Bhavet Kramaha. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service, under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, the Bhagavad Gita literally means the song of God. Bhagavan is a word in Sanskrit that describes a full conception of God. And the first understanding is that as a person like us, in the sense that has a form, a name, qualities, and activities. If you think about it, if you know someone's name and what they look like, and what their qualities are, how they like, and what they do, you have a pretty good idea of who they are. And that's describing Krishna. The Vedic literature, beginning with this Bhagavad Gita, is this word Bhagavan has a certain definite meaning. Bhagavan is a Sanskrit word that means possessed of certain opulences. Opulences being things that we find attractive in other persons. Beauty, wealth, knowledge, strength of all different kinds, like that. Fame, these things attract us to other persons. So Bhagavan means that person who has an infinite amount of these things. It's hard to imagine a person who has infinite beauty, because our experience is there's always a limit on it. You can be the most beautiful person, but after the model shoot or whatever, there's a certain amount of perspiration that comes. You get fatigued, you get tired. There's a limit to how beautiful you can be in these kind of bodies that we have. And even if someone is very beautiful, over time they lose some of that. It's inevitable. That's what material life means. Time takes away whatever opulence we may have. So the idea of someone who's eternally beautiful, and this is mentioned in various other scriptures that we have, how Krishna is, he's eternally youthful. That's one thing. Why should God, if he's all powerful, why should he grow old? That's clearly something that's a minus, to grow old. Well, he's all powerful, he doesn't grow old. And he enjoys this idea of Satchidananda. The Satchidananda is a word that's been current in the West for quite a while now, since the mid-60s. It simply means eternal, Sat, Chit, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And this kind of happiness that's spoken of by the great yogis and the Vedic scholars and those who are wise in this, is happiness that doesn't decrease. That is not the flickering happiness we know in this world. No matter how happy you are, you have it together, we know that there's a time element there, and the circumstances will change. I mean, and even if they don't change right away, the very idea that they will change eventually puts a damper on how happy you can be. I mean, I don't want to throw wet blanket on things, but that's really what material life is all about. So that's a very important aspect of it, is Sat, the idea that there's an eternal reality that doesn't change, that's always there. And even in Western religions, we have some kind of conception of that. What does it mean to go to heaven? I mean, it means that, okay, God is there, and you have an eternal life there, and there's some idea that you'll be happy up there, certainly more happy than in the other place, right? So therefore, there's a sense of breaking free from the bonds of time, of decay. So in the Eastern books of wisdom, like Bhagavad Gita, and another one that we follow, which is our main book, really a foundational book, is called the Bhagavad Purana. Purana is an ancient book of wisdom. These are all literally Sanskrit. That's why it's a little hard to chant these, but Srila Prabhupada, an author, he wanted to give us a chance to get a taste for this Sanskrit language, and so he gave us the transliteration we can read and what the words mean like that. So they describe another reality that is, of which this world is a reflection. Of this material world is a reflection. And so if you accept that, at least theoretically, say, oh, we can know something about that world by studying this world. And that's part of what the science is. And here, this particular verse talks about, Krishna is talking about attaining love for me, this word bhava. And the last part of this, what we call purport or commentary, gave a little description of how one achieves that goal. Adal means at the beginning. There's some faith, and then you practice, you associate, and you become purified, and you eventually experience this bhava, or love. So, in this world, what really makes something worthwhile? Relationships, loving relationships, right? I mean, if you have all the money in the world, but you're completely alone, you're in a hellish condition. So it's these loving relationships that we thrive on. Certainly a young child, we know if a child is an orphan, and it's an unfortunate child, without the parents and the family, it's going to be very difficult to thrive, So we all experience that. But we also experience in this world that these relationships are temporary. Again, this sense of there's a change. You grow apart, or you grow older, or whatever happens, or some tragedy happens. There's just constant change. So in the spiritual world, there's assuming for a moment, it's ideal, of which this world is a reflection, temporary reflection. So God and His all those who are there, they're enjoying these loving relationships without limit. There's no time limit, you see, and relationships are completely fulfilling. This is what bhakti yoga is all about. Bhakti means a reciprocal relationship of love and exchange, based on the idea of service. And here we have relationship like friends and lovers and parent and child, like that, isn't it? And so that perfect relationship is there in the spiritual world with God. And He's all-powerful and infinite, so He can reciprocate exactly according to our individual proclivities. It's not that they're all cookie-cutter, stereotype. That we all have our individuality. And we have our individual relationship with the Lord, which is eternal and ever-fulfilling and ever-fresh. So that's what's going on there. Here, we're trying to imitate that. We long for something like that, but we can never quite attain it. And that's what the yoga system, the bhakti yoga system, every yoga system is meant to give us a way of achieving eternal life. First, to break out of the bonds of birth and death. This is called samsara. I first learned this term back in the late 60s, early 70s, when I was going around New York in different yoga studios and reading books on Buddhism. And the idea of breaking out of the circle of samsara, birth and death, old age, disease. This was very prominent there. So in this particular verse, Krishna is speaking about becoming free from three things: raga, bhaya, and krodha. Now, raga is material attachment, bhaya is fear, and krodha is anger. And he's saying that these things, one can become free from these things. And if one absorbs the mind in the absolute, perfection, manmaya means in me, taking shelter of me, then through knowledge and austerity, one can become purified. Puta means purified. Purified of what? We'll discuss that in a minute. But if one can do these things, one can attain love for me and not break free from the round of birth and death. So it's really a very hopeful scenario if we're inclined to practice this discipline. That's the whole idea. So in this purport, he analyzes those three things, raga, bhaya, and krodha, and how each one of them is an impediment for a certain type of person who is finding it impossible to progress in devotional service or bhakti yoga. So the first thing is raga, material attachment. Now this is something we take for granted. What would life be without our desires to go here and do this? And our flip side is to avoid certain things, right? That's what it's all about. So, but if we're completely absorbed in trying to enjoy the things of this world and avoid the things that are painful, then we're in a state of mind where the idea of transcendence, of restricting these things is not part of the field. I mean, I remember I grew up a complete atheist. I didn't even have an ordinary religion in my life back in the 50s and 60s. I'm kind of old. And there's nothing on my radar to enter into this kind of thing in the 60s. I went through certain changes. I started looking. I came in touch with the devotees, eventually started chanting, and I got into this discipline. But if you're completely absorbed in material consciousness, the whole idea of a transcendental world or restricting that for a higher reality, it doesn't even enter into you have to have a certain sense of curiosity about philosophical things, about eternal life, about purification. So that's the first problem. Most people are wrapped up with this raga, material attachment, which also means fear, bhaya, because you're afraid of losing what you have or not measuring up. So many things to be fearful of. But the class of transcendentalists who is unable to conceive of the personal nature of the Absolute is fearful of again getting material body, which is fraught with the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. That fear. So it's like, well, if I understand, we understand that this world is a world of frustration because we're identifying with material body and form, so the Absolute must be formless. The reverse of this form and all of the senses and all these things that are holding us down. Therefore, the Absolute must be formless. That's the fear of personality in transcendence. And then comes the krodha. Krodha is anger. So this is the class of persons who have tried this philosophy, that philosophy. I remember I was doing that, and they fail for you. They don't work for you. And after a while, you just become cynical. The most logical thing is that everything is a void. And if you study high Buddhism, there's a lot of that. I remember reading a book about that, where you're trying to escape from suffering by voiding out your personality and just meditating on practically nothing. There's a certain type of discipline like that. So all three of these have to be given up. Vita, raga, bhaya, and krodha. We're certainly don't want to absorb our mind always in material things of attraction and repulsion. But at the same time, we should accept the reality, because of the words of Krishna and the Guru, that there is a world of personality that's not bound by time. And the first step in understanding is that we have to ask ourselves, who are we actually? What am I? And this is answered, because this is chapter 4. Okay, we're going to get now a door phenomenon. Hare Krishna. Welcome. We're going to have darshan at 8:15. Yes, you're welcome to stay and listen to class until then or whatever. But, okay. So, the first question is, what am I? And Krishna answers that question in chapter 2. The answer is that each one of us is what we call an atma, or a spirit. We're not the body. The body is constantly changing. The spirit doesn't change. We're never born and we never die. This is like a revolutionary concept. What is born? The body is born and the body dies. The body goes through all these changes. Krishna has this verse in the beginning of chapter 2. Dehi nosmin yata dehe. just as in this body, we've all experienced where we're constantly changing. We can remember when we were 6, 7, 8. Hare Krishna, please. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. I'm sorry, you can't. Yeah, if you can talk, please. Yeah. So each of us was once 6, 7 years old. I can remember some things from that. Can everyone have some memory, right? So we had a different body, each of us, smaller, child's body. We had a different mind, but we were the same person. Help with the door. We have a problem with the door. And so then you grow up, you become an adolescent. Your body certainly changes, right? Your mind changes, but you're the same person. We know, right? We are the person who's conscious of the changes of our physical body and our mind and everything like that. We are that conscious entity. And as we go on in life, you become an adult, become middle-aged, you become old like me. It's still the same person. I'm conscious, but the body is certainly changing. You can see in the mirror. The mind is changing. You forget things, right? But you're not going to die. That's a big thing. Now, what happens then? In other words, if you don't die, what happens? Well, if you have so many attachments, unfulfilled desires, and things that happen, you've created a certain mentality. That is the template of your next body. And there's also something called karma. Your activities in this life have repercussions, both in this life and in the next life. If you're a very virtuous person, you like to help others, you're unselfish, you do good works, you'll cash in the next lifetime. People will help you. You might find yourself born in a very wealthy family or something like that, pious family. You'll have a much better life. And in the Vedic culture, there's even a way of performing sacrifices and living a certain way where you'll leave this plane of existence and you'll go to what we call the heavenly planets. Still material, but where there's eventual death, but you may live for thousands and thousands of years in a much more idyllic situation. But that will eventually end and you'll come back here because it's still in the material world. But one thing is absolutely certain. You will never die. And you were never born. So how did we get here in this situation where we're having this very, very deep illusion that we're being born, we're growing, we're getting sick, we're dying, which is keeping us in a state of anxiety. The Vedic wisdom is that this is all a big illusion. The whole thing is an illusion. We place so much emphasis on the things in this world because we think this is life. This is my only life. But it's a big mistake. And that illusion is crushed when we finally leave this body. And I like to say the first thing that you know when your body dies is, hey, I'm not dead. I'm not dead. Have you ever heard, now it's a common thing, the near-death experiences. Have you ever read about that? Where someone almost has a heart attack or something or is in the hospital. And, we've seen it all. There's the emergency noises going on. There's a flat line there. The nurses and the doctors rushing in, the paddles, Well, sometimes it doesn't do any good. The person dies and you float away. But meanwhile, you're watching them coming into the room. And later on, if you succeed, sometimes you can say, yeah, this nurse came in there, this doctor. There's books showing that. Near-death experiences, NDEs. It's a whole culture. Well, what does that mean? It means that the soul is temporarily left the body, or in a subtle body, the mind is hovering. But if you actually die, then you go on to the next body, and you don't know exactly what that is going to. But there is another body coming, and the fact of it is that it doesn't have to be a human body. If we act in certain subhuman ways, and there's a whole science of it, then we can lose this human body. And that's a great tragedy, because in these lower bodies, cats, dogs, insects, whatever, they have no chance of self-realization, of this jnana tapasa, puta, in purification through knowledge and through austerity. It doesn't have to be severe, extreme austerities like you read these yogis perform, fasting for weeks on end, In order to discipline the body, the different yoga systems, this Bhakti yoga system is light on the austerities, really. But they'll go into the Himalayas, and in the wintertime, crack the ice, go swimming in there, you know. And then when the summer comes, come back down to the plains in the desert, sit there in the desert with fires around and the sun burning and just meditate, you know. That's not necessary. But there's a purpose to that, and that is to strengthen the mind and the will. And the yogis, they can get incredible powers. They can live for a very long time, even in this material body. Even today. Each 12 years, there's what they call a Kumbh Mela. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Have you ever heard of Kumbh Mela? This is a huge spiritual festival in India. It takes place in the city called Allahabad, used to be known as Prayag, in northern India. Two major rivers. You've heard of the Ganges. Everyone knows the Ganges. There's another sacred river that runs through Vrindavan, Krishna's hometown, called the Yamuna. So they converge in this Allahabad. And then there's this third river, this kind of a subtle river that used to flow, the Saraswati. So it's called Triveni. Triveni means three rivers meeting. And it's believed that if you take a bath in that convergence of those rivers at a certain auspicious time, calculated astronomically, astrologically, which is always in early January, it's freezing cold. This is northern India. You'll get liberation. Millions of people come. I'm talking about tens of millions. They converge on that city. The army comes, they build like a whole temporary city, they have post office and everything, you know, to accommodate those people. And they all come for that purpose, to get liberation. Well, Bhakti Yoga, we are concerned with liberation, but only tangentially. If we practice these principles of austerity, and because it's called jnana tapasa. The tapasa means austerity. So what is the austerity? Well, okay, we get up early in the morning, really early, like between 3 and 4. And we have our first program here at 4:30. And we sing, and we chant Hare Krishna, and we chant a prayer to the spiritual master in Sanskrit. And we see the beautiful forms of the deities. If you stay after 8:15, you'll see. You know, these are carved forms, but they embody the divine, and one can advance through that. And then we chant. Another austerity is to chant on beads, this Hare Krishna mantra. And we do that for about 2 hours until 7:15. Then we have another ceremony and a class, something like this, on a different book. And then there's breakfast prasadam. We call prasadam is holy food, vegetarian food at 8:30. Now, of course, those who are initiated and seriously following, there are certain restrictions. No intoxication. The whole idea is to keep your consciousness clear, you see. And any kind of intoxication, whether it's alcohol or drugs or even caffeine, nicotine, they affect your mind. And they also tend to put you in the bodily consciousness, you know, to make you more absorbed in your physical feelings and so forth. They're a clouding of the mind. So we want to kind of clear the consciousness. So that's no intoxication. Everyone knows we're vegetarian. You know, no eating of meat, fish, or eggs. No gambling, which can also be completely addictive. Many of you know, I had a bout with that when I was 18 years old. Not real serious, but, you know, I know how it can be. It can really get into your mind. And no illicit sex. This is a big one, is that sex is only in marriage for having children. But those kind of restrictions become possible and feasible when you're tasting the higher pleasure of Krishna consciousness, the spiritual pleasure. And this is what comes from basically chanting and hearing and serving and being a devotee. So it's feasible. That's why this movement is spread all over the world. When Srila Prabhupada first came to America in 1965, he said, how am I going to ever get these people to, you know, practice bhakti yoga? He said, when I tell them those 4 regular principles, I just said, they're going to get on the boat and go back home. Because it's the lifeblood of what's going on, right? But he found, by the power of this mantra, this Maha Mantra, and I wanted to speak about that a little bit, because everything comes from that, meaning that it becomes feasible to even practice this process if one seriously chants this Hare Krishna mantra. The whole idea is that we're experiencing this transcendental sound. The sound is what is the main purifying agent, especially in this age. And the name, remember I mentioned how, what defines a person? Okay, the name, the form, what do they look like, qualities, and activities. If the police are looking for somebody, what? They're going to know who is it, right? And how tall is he or she? You know, what's the color of the hair? Qualities, right? And you know, what do they look like? What their qualities are, and what do they do? You know, this defines a person. So because Krishna is absolute, God is absolute, meaning that he's not limited. The name alone embodies all of those things. So when you chant Hare Krishna, you're actually associating directly with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's just like going out into the sun, transcendental sun. If you go out into the sun, you stay for a while, you're going to get a sunburn, you get tan, you get some benefits from the UV. There's an effect there. Just by walking out in the sun. Just by chanting this name and hearing, one will be in touch with the Supreme. And there's an effect going on. And I didn't believe it. I didn't know anything about that. I took it up as kind of an experiment. I was practicing yoga, and so I started chanting a couple of rounds a day. It took about 15, 20 minutes. And I went to work. I had a job, you know. Now, I knew that you were supposed to try to remember, because I was reading Bhagavad Gita, so I would chant on my way to work. And then in the work in the hospital, I would be also chanting on, you know, so in this way I was kind of exposed to it. But the sound itself has this, it opens up the channel. It's very, very auspicious. And it's powerful, especially in this age, given by an incarnation of God who lived only 500 years ago, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that is the main process of tapasa and puta, of purification in this age. And one ultimately wants to attain this love for God, this prema, which is, I mean, I haven't experienced it yet, but you can experience just hints of it, and it's completely attractive. And I've been doing this now for 46 years, and I've not regretted a moment of it. You know, and even if I don't achieve the full perfection in this lifetime, this is one of the most amazing things about this practice. You don't lose anything. Because it's completely transcendental, you carry it over into your next life. Whereas what you know, multi-billionaires, millionaires, famous people, anything that you have, what's going to happen in the next life? They're not going to take it. You can't take it with you. But you can take this with you. These assets. So that's what is being spoken of here. That if one can give up or reduce this raga, bhaya, and krodha, and take shelter of Krishna, especially through this chanting process, then one can be well on one's way toward attaining this bhava, or love for God, which is really the ultimate goal of bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga means loving devotion. Okay. Yes, Dravida Prabhu. We have a mic. Wow.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
We hear you.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was an excellent.
Well,
This verse.
just repeating the words of Srila Prabhupada.
Sure. Just on the point that you were making, that that, you know, once you leave the body, the first realization you get is that you're not the body.
Right.
And if anyone knows what I do, one of my main services is I go out and I distribute books at the various universities, colleges, Balboa Park, wherever. And actually that's one of the things I would tell people, just to see, because I'm a goofball and I like to see the different responses I get. And I'll inquire from them and say, what if I were to tell you that everything you think yourself to be, you're not? And then I explain, giving myself as an example. And if you were to ask me who I am, I may think that I'm 24, that I'm a monk, that I live in SanDiego, and all such things. But when the body perishes, that identity doesn't exist anymore. So who am I really? I'm the spiritual essence within, inhabiting a body. And to know that essence is self-realization. And I'll point out the self-realization book. So that was interesting. I just wanted to make that comment regarding, Prabhupada says in this last paragraph, in the beginning one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization.
Yeah.
And I've been recently rereading Hiding in Unnatural Happiness book by His Holiness Devanrita Swami, if anyone knows who that is. And towards the end of the preface, he explains how this book is for those seekers who find themselves somewhere in the middle point. And he explains that those who are grossly absorbed in material life, they're too, they cannot understand this transcendental wisdom. And those who are spiritually elevated or on the path, then he seeks their blessings. But for those who are in the middle point, where they have some taste or they have some inclination towards spiritual life, but yet they still find themselves here and there attached to material reality. And so my question is, how does one water the seed of desire to go deeper in spiritual life? That we've tasted we have some glimpse of what that is, we have some attraction for it, but how do we remain on the path?
Well, as mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami, the beginning is what he calls Shraddha. Shraddha has different meanings, and this is not absolute. Shraddha generally means faith, but Prabhupada said in this case it means a preliminary interest or respect, in order to check it out, and that brings one into the association of devotees. Association is so important. Everyone knows that, a mother and father, they're so concerned about who their kid is hanging out with, right? Because they know that the character is formed by your association. What's the idea of going to school? Well, because you're going to associate with someone who knows more, and not only that, but through books and so forth, you'll associate with great sages, people of the past who wrote so many things. And in other words, it's all association as what forms your interests. And so if one wants to advance in spiritual life, in self-realization, then one should find persons who are in that state of advancement. If you want to learn how to play the violin, well, go to Juilliard. That's a famous music school around New York. And there you'll find the teachers and also other students who are into it, and you can get excited about it, right? So the same thing is true for spiritual life, for Krishna consciousness. If you've experienced a little bit of Krishna consciousness and you want to try to deepen your experience, then search out the association of devotees. And especially, there's so many festivals. The festivals, the Krishna consciousness is full of festivals. In fact, Prabhupada set up the temples in such a way that there's at least a mini festival every morning and evening. You remember the Brooklyn Temple. Everybody get together. We had like 100 devotees chanting. We had excellent kirtan leaders, beautiful deities. It was a special time in New York. And the evening program was like a big thing. Again, and everyone, there's a difference between, chanting at 4:30 in the morning. It's more meditative, the lights are down, But then in the evening, lights are up. Everyone's just had a full day of bhakti, different services, and then you get together, the big shower, come down to the temple, just blow it out. That's where you get your experience. It's kirtan. And the kirtan is so attractive that it's going on even in yoga studios that have nothing to do with ISKCON. They've discovered the Hare Krishna mantra. They learn to play a little harmonium. Someone learns to play the drum. There's a tremendous aesthetic attraction as well. And beautiful music and the uplifting company and nice prasad. So that's what increases one's enthusiasm to become serious and take up the bhajan. See, you got this the little faith, interest, association with the devotees, and then bhajana kriya. Bhajana kriya means chanting, basically. And the association continues. You're associating with Krishna. I explained how, through the sound of his name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It has a tremendous effect on the consciousness. Krishna's there. So it's all association. And if one can come to the point of having a regular sadhana, where you visit the temple you make your home a temple, you chant a little bit together, you learn more and more, you read, which is also association. We just read this beautiful verse in purport. We're associating with Krishna through his words, and with Prabhupada, a great devotee, through his words. I mean, how do you associate with people? This is one of the main ways. And that's how one becomes determined to, as you say, there's so many impediments, there's so many impurities, but one can overcome them through the determined practice of sadhana that's inspired through association. Your faith deepens, your determination deepens. So that's the answer. And that's how all of us became devotees. We met devotees, we got inspired to take up the practice, and eventually Krishna he's there in the heart of everyone. And he says, this person is taking too long. It does something in your life that makes you have to take shelter. Okay, I surrender. So that's how it works, and that's how everyone became a devotee. Okay. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about this recently, just on another point, how you mentioned that real happiness, real wealth comes from loving relationships. And I was reflecting how those who are deeply experiencing the connection from their spiritual practice, their sadhana, then it manifests through their relationships. And those who are actually superficial in their spiritual practice, that also manifests.
Yes.
So I mean, if you are having a deep relationship with God, with Krishna, then you'll see everyone as siblings, or you'll see everyone as spirit soul.
You can see it with Srila Prabhupada. He went all over the world. After his miraculous, saga, comes to America. He's 69. His health is not that great. He's got like $2 in his pocket. No friends. Can you imagine? But he had this tremendous faith in the chanting, which he knew works. And he had his instruction from his own guru, so he had all his assets. And somewhere, struggled very hard for 8 or 9 months, here and there, wandering the streets of New York with his books. He had some books for sale, like that. But Krishna had brought him to America at just the right point, and he was in the right spot. And that is the hippie era, when LSD was, and people were questioning. There's a lot of questioning going on, ferment. And young people were searching. People who hadn't really made a full commitment this way or that way in their lives and so forth. And so he was able to plant some seeds of interest, and always with the chanting, wherever he got a chance. I lived 2 blocks from Tompkins Square Park, where Srila Prabhupada would go on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And he had a little bongo drum, none of these big madungas, yet, and half a bongo drum. And he would beat that bongo drum for a couple hours, he had 3 or 4 devotees with him, And by his intensity, people would gather, because this is an event, this is a happening, let's check it out, And naturally, the reporters from the papers are there taking a picture. You got to, and he met Allen Ginsberg. Even today, you may know that name. He was a famous poet in those days. Anyway, so in this way, he was able to attract people to at least come and hear. And he would speak on Bhagavad Gita, just like in the evening, like this. And gradually, through the kirtans and the classes and the prasadam, he got some serious followers. So the process works, and then it just exploded. I mean, he then went to the West Coast, and gradually all over the world. He went around the world, and he proved that it's universally. He went to Russia for like a few days. This is the height of the Soviet era. This is 1971 or something. So he goes to Moscow with one aide with him. An elderly Indian gentleman. And what are you going to do? So there's a picture of him standing in front of the Kremlin, the famous Kremlin. There's Srila Prabhupada. But he met one young man who was curious, and he spoke to him for like a day, intensively, and implanted in him he initiated him. And this Ananta Shanti then went out in the middle of the Soviet era. Everyone knows there was so much repression, And he would meet people, and they were hungry for spiritual substance, because there was all this repression going on. And he made some interesting. Then they would have this underground where they would print books and give them out. They would copy this book by hand. This is a 1,000-page book, one after another, and give it out. And some of them got arrested. They put in the psychiatric hospitals. But he was able to carry on. Probably he made one devotee, who then made a lot of devotees. And then when he finally blew open in '89 or '91, whenever it was, people were just ready for explosion. And there's thousands of devotees in Russia now. So it proved, absolutely, it's universal. We're all living entities. We're all hankering for that ultimate loving relationship with the absolute person. And Krishna is so attractive that anybody, Chinese or Russians and Mongolians, anybody can be attracted. And there are literally thousands and thousands of devotees and temples all over the world. So anyway, it's the process works. So many yoga groups and gurus came and they left. They're not prominent anymore. But ISKCON keeps trucking along. We just had our 50-year anniversary, and because it's substantial and it's real. Okay, I think we should adjourn. Let me give you one little poem. I tend to write a few poems. So this is actually based on a verse in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. Everybody dies, nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.